All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Baking and Shaking with Washington Red Raspberries. We're honored to partner with the Washington Red Raspberry Commission on this class series and to demonstrate various applications of frozen red raspberry formats for industry professionals like you and like us. I'm Zach Miller. I'm the Baking and Pastry Arts instructor here at the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute, or NOCI for short. I'm joined today by James Kubie of Coquette Restaurants. Today's session will be focused on plated desserts, which I'm very excited about. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Before we get started, let's take a look at the story behind Washington Red Raspberries, which make up 90% of the nation's frozen red raspberry crop.
My dad started this farm in '77. We grew up running around in the berry fields, and raspberries run deep in our veins.
You just have to deal with what Mother Nature gives you every year, and every year is different.
I'm passionate about doing the best job that we can to get a prime berry to share with the world.
I'm going to have you pan down here, and we'll take a peek at the raspberries that, or the raspberry products, the multiple raspberry products that you should have received in the mail. I'm going to talk about a little bit about those and the ones that we're going to be using today. So I'm going to start off with the seedless puree. So you can see that right here. It comes in a 1 pound container. This is one that we'll be using today for the sorbet that we'll be making. We have, you can see the nice frost on it because it's a little bit humid today in New Orleans, well, every day in New Orleans. So we get a nice pretty frost on them. So these are the whole IQF whole frozen. We have whole and broken here as well, so it's mixed up in there, whole and broken pieces. We have the dehydrated powder, which we're also going to be using today. And we have the dehydrated fragments here as well, which are really interesting as well. So some really great products. These are the ones that you've received. Really cool things that you can do with these. Really kind of surprising with some of the quality that we've seen. Just we expected a good product when we actually got to taste them. We were every chef that I've worked with this has been really pleasantly surprised. So we can we'll pan back up and we'll talk a little bit more about James and I. James and I go way back. We used to work together at Coquette many moons ago. So I was a pastry chef at Coquette. We worked together there for, you probably think we're my longest employee.
2.5 years, yeah.
2.5 years we worked together there. So before I got into education, and then he took over. So he took over and ran with it, to say the least. So, and we're speaking of which, we're talking about some of the products that that we're using, and I think you were surprised. I think well, tell us the story that we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the product when you first got a hold of it and got to play around with it.
Right. So I got I got the products the other day to start doing some trial runs with these things to make sure that the recipes worked, that the see what the yield would be, just so I didn't randomize up here. But I was really surprised because I've used frozen purees in the past, and you have to adjust those for what the added ingredients that they put in there. And so I was really surprised when I opened this one and saw that it was 100% raspberry, and then I could just use my own recipes just like if I had frozen the berries myself. And so it was very useful. I spun it, and it is absolutely like my sorbet. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's really great. Some of the things as we were tasting these products, the flavor intensity of these has been really great. So it's really nice to be able to use a really high quality product like that. And you said you've worked and had to do these things before. People send you a product and here, check this out.
Right.
See what's going on with it. And you're like, oh well, okay. And then this was it was a pleasant surprise. This is a really great product to use.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And and something that I think every single chef we've talked to has been their eyes kind of really opened up to this if they've not used this product before. So anyway, without further delay, we're going to let you jump right into what you're going to do. And,
awesome.
You're going to start off with what part of your
So we're going to start off with the raspberry jalapeno sorbet. which is very much the star of this final plated dessert. And also, it's the one that's going to take the longest to set up because it does need to freeze. So that's always how I operate. I always like see what needs to set and then, you know, kind of move backwards. So I'm just seeding half of a jalapeno and just like real quick, you know, rough chop because it's going directly into the blender.
Not something we're known for, though. Our pastry chefs are our knife skills, though, too. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Please do not try to learn a knife skill from me. I'm a baker, and I do my best to just cut it into small pieces. So we got our jalapeno. Gonna scale. And do about 100 grams of lime juice. Perfect. And then we're going to give this a quick puree. All right, I'm excited for this monster.
Yeah.
Just
start off on low.
Start off on low. We're going to go low. And then, let's see.
Do we get plugged in?
Hopefully. Is there a power switch?
Go for it.
Ah, there we go. Perfect. So now just...
Can I clear this off from the show?
Oh, sure. I'll take this guy. And then we're just going to scale again straight into the blender. Tear right there. We're going to put our raspberry puree.
That's the full 1 pound.
Mm-hmm. Full 1 pound, 450 grams. And then we're going to do 150 grams of sugar.
So no sorbet syrup with this. We're just adding everything right together.
Exactly. And so the reason I do that is so that we're not adding extra water. We're just like getting the flavor and using the juice to hydrate the sorbet. And then I'll reach over and get a little spoon. And then we're going to do 25 grams of glucose. And the reason I use glucose is so that we can add the sugar that we need for texture without adding a lot of additional sweetness. And so adding a little bit of glucose into a sorbet recipe is very useful in that application. Just a tiny bit more. And voila. There we go. So that is good to go. We're going to put our lid back on and then we are going to blend it. Yes, please. Thank you. Gorgeous. And then, red. And then we're just going to pass it. See that beautiful color? Like, that's what I'm talking about.
When you say pass, it just means pass it through a chinois. When we were writing the recipes, I got a question like, what does that mean? I think that's maybe something you got from me.
Yeah.
So pass it through a chinois. It's just
just strain it.
Just straining it. Yeah.
Thank you. And I used a little bit of a ladle to push it through.
Where's that other one he brought up?
All right, and that is literally our sorbet base. That is ready to rock. And so depending on what kind of ice cream maker you have, if you have a Paco Jet, you can just pour this directly into your beaker and then freeze it. If you have a batch freezer, you can just put this, you can chill this and then spin it just like you do any other sorbet. And
Yep, it'll work just fine. I think anything else. So
kind of magical. This is it. Yeah.
But the nice thing about it, interesting thing sometimes with a Paco Jet too, because it does have a blade, I don't actually strain it. I just let whatever's in there because it works like a blender too. So I just blend it. It just runs right into it too. So
that's amazing. I
there's
could have
different
just
things
put
you can
all
do.
that in there and it would have done the work.
It's either that or I'm lazy. It's one of the two things. So I don't like washing a shimon. It could be anything, all of the above, any and all of the above.
Valid.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. So that's our puree.
So what are we on to next, Chef?
So next we are going to make our sweet corn flan.
And we've got our other blender.
I got it right here.
Okay, cool.
So this one is, again, a super easy recipe. When I make plated desserts, I do try to make, because it takes so many components to make one single plate, I like everything to be as straightforward as possible. And so what we have right here is 5 eggs. Thank you. This is, I believe, 12 ounces of sweet yellow corn. $225 grams of cream cheese. One can of evaporated milk. One can of sweetened condensed milk. Oop. Get all that. Thank you.
That won't blend up very well with the lid.
No, that
Yeah.
would that definitely also would not work in the Paco Jet.
No, not so
And so,
much.
and so then we're also going to do five grams of salt. And then one scraped vanilla bean.
Now, I find it interesting, I really encourage people to use salt more in desserts, especially plated desserts. I mean, there's things you have to be careful of, like if you're adding it to bread, but or frozen desserts, like trying to make a sea salt ice cream,
Yes.
can be a little bit challenging because
I
salt,
remember
as
that
we know,
ice cream.
yeah, it was good, but it was hard to kind of keep that one frozen. So we did one a few years back. What did we do that with? We did that with the chocolate dessert.
Yeah, so that one got served with a chocolate cremeux, andouille caramel, and then sea salt ice cream.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah, so that was one of the desserts we did there that I was kind of shocked that it sold so well, and I think
Yeah.
it's because the servers really liked it. And I don't know if you remember John. John sold a lot of them because
Oh yeah,
John really liked it, and he sold it. He wanted people to have it. So so we did some interesting things. So just using salt in desserts, it's a really great thing to use. It does kind of turns up the volume on the flavor a little bit. It just kind of really elevates things. Especially something that kind of, you think of something that goes with butter. You think of like buttery corn like this, goes really, really well with it. You think of eating corn on the cob, butter and salt, right? So it's just kind of a natural thing that goes well with it.
completely.
Caramel, things like that.
Yeah,
Chocolate,
and it
salt.
makes it easier to eat an entire plate of dessert when everything is balanced, nothing is too sweet, everything is just the flavors that it should be, and the salt enhances the undertone flavors. It's really great. All right, and then we just blend this. Yes, please, into the pot. Perfect. And so this one we can strain directly into the pot that we're going to cook it in. So normally with a flan, you're going to bake it in a double boiler, or not double boiler, you're going to in a bain-marie to prevent it from burning or caramelizing. This particular component, we are going to use it as more of a piped cremeux. And so this is my particular method. Thank you, chef. So we'll just strain this out. And really, we're just kind of straining out the skins of those corn kernels. Everything else makes its way.
And that's something I really find interesting about your dish. You do a lot of savory components. You're not afraid of vegetables at all. You know, minimal sugar, I think, but still very, very balanced.
Thanks, chef.
So we'll take that.
All right. So first thing that you do, don't forget this stuff, is just reserve a little bit off to the side. I think in the recipe I said about 1/4 of it. That's a good amount. And we're going to use this later on. It's going to help us get the exact right texture we are looking for. So we're going to move it over to the burner. This guy over here. Oh, I should probably plug it in.
I got you.
Thank you, sir.
Now,
Great.
these are really strong, by the way. I forgot to warn you earlier. So, you know, high is really, really high. So I usually
yeah, that looks
drop
great.
it about 60%. It's probably fine. So we've had that issue before. With, you know, when I first started using these burners, they were very strong compared to what I was used to.
So just like any other custard, you're going to want to start whisking immediately and often just continuously, because you don't want clumps of, in this case, egg and cream cheese to stick to the bottom of your pot and to burn. You want all of the custard to move around and be as homogeneous as possible the entire time. So this will kind of, as you will see in a minute, we're going to take this to a level that you wouldn't normally bake a custard or cook a custard or an anglaise or anything like that. The reason for that is we're going to bake it almost to the, or cook it almost to the point of it breaking, because we need it to be able to hold up to the blending and the chilling process, so that when we pipe it onto the plate, it's going to still have body and not be like a loose custard. So we're just going to keep whisking it until it thickens, making sure that we're getting all the way around, all over the bottom, and just moving all of the custard around. Do we have a small spatula, like a rubber spat?
I sure do. Cabinet 2 there. We have a lot of assistants floating around just out of view, so.
This is magical. I want to work like this every day.
So I was actually, I just had one of your desserts this past weekend at the restaurant. You guys have done for years, actually, something called a No Menu Tuesday. And the idea was, well, Tuesday is kind of a slower night.
Yeah.
And so they decided to have a little bit of fun. And what they would do is what they really like doing is having people that they know, other chefs, chef friends coming into the restaurant, and you basically cook for them. Like they sit down and like they don't get a menu, and you just cook whatever you have and kind of spur the moment, kind of whatever is fresh, whatever you really love that day. And that's such a fun thing on both sides, I think, for people to do. So they decided, why don't we just do that for anybody who comes in? So if you come in to the restaurant on a Tuesday during No Menu Tuesday season, you don't get a menu. You sit down and like, we're going to give you what we have to cook that day. And usually it's a predetermined menu, usually kind of made up that day, the day before, or even the week before, kind of depending on the schedule. And now during the time of coronavirus, where the restaurant is basically shut down for dining for the most part, you did No Menu Tuesday to go.
Yes.
Which I got to experience last Friday. And so what you do is you get a menu. This is what you get, and you get boxed up in courses. It's all labeled with numbers, of course, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you get a menu. You also get pictures of the final dessert, instructions on how to reheat it or how to plate it, or suggestions anyway. And basically you take it home and you plate your own 4-course meal. And basically a heat and serve idea. And the dessert that you did was, well, tell us what the dessert that you did for that was.
Okay, so our theme this week was Christmas in July, because it actually went out on the 31st. So my dessert was a Eggnog Hurricane, which hurricanes, if you haven't been to New Orleans, are kind of our like super trashy classic drink, and it's flavored with passion fruit and rum and citrus. So I made a kind of weird little gingerbread house looking dessert that had bay leaf mousse and nutmeg chantilly with a gingerbread royal icing, and then hurricane gelée. So it's passion fruit and rum and citrus. And it just kind of turned into this like giant like Jell-O shot dessert, and it was absolutely delicious. I'm so happy with that.
Yeah, it was really delicious because it had like the flavor of like you expect like a summertime cocktail,
Right.
but also of Christmas.
Yeah.
So it was really, really good. And talking about the balance of it as well, I mean, I was full by the time we got to the dessert, but I ate the whole thing.
Yeah.
So my wife got a few bites. She did get a few bites, but I ended up that was a clean plate. So and really, really, really impressed with it. So it's just really a great way of kind of seeing, still being able to be creative and give kind of an experience to guests, even though they may be a grab and go or a home delivery type of situation. They're still able to do that. Well, the other cool thing you guys do is you create a playlist.
Yeah.
On Spotify that you send them, here's a playlist that we created to go along with your meal while you're cooking and while you're eating the meal. So it's kind of able to recreate the experience of dining in without actually dining in. So I thought it was a really creative idea, and really, really well executed. So I mean, the dessert was fantastic.
Oh,
Love
thank
the dessert.
you.
The highlight, don't tell Mike. It was the highlight of the meal, I think. So
He gets so mad when all the feedback says like their favorite course is dessert, which is unfair because it's the last course and it's like always has like a bunch of sugar and booze in it.
it's completely fair. I think it's fine.
So right now our custard is thickening up, and you can see that it's kind of up to a boil. You can see little bubbles coming up. However, while this is where you would normally stop, we're going to take it even further. I've learned over the years making various kinds of flan like this that it is really critical that it starts popping like that. So we are ready to roll. So I'm going to turn that off.
Just press the button.
And then, see, if you guys can see, it still has some body, it has some nap to it.
Up to the camera.
Yeah. See, it's like holding up on its own, but it's obviously broken at this point. So what we're gonna do, put it into our container, depending on what size batch you're making. Can go, can I pass you that guy? Thank you. Yeah, and see, like in the bottom, it's just like broken, eggy craziness. That's exactly what we're looking for.
So it almost looks like the consistency of pastry cream without the starch, using the starch.
Yes, yes, chef.
That's, if I could
Absolutely.
use that as an analogy.
And so then we are going to use our handy dandy Immersion Blender. I'll pass you that guy. Thank you very much.
I'll get a plug here if you want.
Oh, great.
I'll get the plug here.
Thank you. We'll go over here.
We've got power all over the place, so.
Power. At work, I have literally one outlet, so I'm constantly changing what I'm doing. So this is where we're going to take what we had reserved earlier. And the reason why we have it reserved is because this is still raw egg and all the other things, right? So when we go in here and we blend, we're going to pour this into it, and that's going to be what is going to bring everything back together and get it right to the perfect consistency.
But because of the residual heat, it's still going to cook the egg.
Exactly.
So.
And that's why you have to cook it so high so that it has that heat and it is so thoroughly hot all the way through. And so this, we're just going to blend until it's super glossy. There's no lumps. There's no nothing.
And it's I think it's a great way of kind of taking what you consider something traditional like a flan. You can see, kind of think about it in like baked in a dish, and kind of what you think of traditionally, and then kind of taking that and using it as a component on something plated like this. And
Yeah.
So one, it's familiar to the guest. It's like, hey, it's a flan. It tastes like flan, but I'm going to show it to you on the plate in a different way. And I think that's really, really interesting. It's something I love to do on plated desserts as well. Is like, hey, this is familiar to you, but it's going to be just a little bit different.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about this versus like a cremeux is this is vegetarian. There's no gelatin in it, so if you have somebody who doesn't eat pork or doesn't eat any kind of meat products, this is going to have the same body and the same gloss as you can see in there. When this cools down, it's going to be absolutely pipeable. It's going to hold up. It's the perfect filling for an eclair or anything like that.
Oh, cool.
And it has, because it has condensed milk and cream cheese in it, it has this really beautiful texture and this mouthfeel that is unlike any of those other components. So it's very unique onto itself.
And without using gelatin, because I think that's something that it's a really kind of a go-to for most pastry chefs, is using gelatin for certain things. But it's nice to be able to get away from that when somebody is vegetarian.
Yes,
So.
absolutely. I am this summer, I'm learning a lot about the joys of gelatin because of doing everything to go, not being able to do frozen things, learning how to use gelatin in new and exciting ways. But I do love my flan, so it works out really well. Do we have a cutting board?
Cutting board. I will get you another cutting
Thank you, chef. Perfect. I'll grab my little knife. Thank you. Appreciate it.
There you go.
So the next component we're going to make is the green tomato foam, and it starts with a sweet salsa verde. So I have these green tomatoes. They are washed. They are lovely. Just gonna cut off my little ends. The thing I love about green tomatoes and how I kind of came up with this recipe is that they kind of have the same mouthfeel and slightly the same flavor profile as a Granny Smith apple, but it is definitely more suited towards summer dining. And in the South, we take our green tomatoes very seriously. So I was very excited to be able to use it on my menu as well. And
that's another thing. I mean, you see, I guess I hesitate to call it a trend, but we'll call it a trend for lack of a better word, of using vegetables and savory ingredients kind of crossing over into pastry. But once you kind of think about really what, like you talked about, it's a green tomato, but what does it taste like? Well, it's very reminiscent of a Granny Smith apple. It's like, okay, what would I do with a Granny Smith apple?
Yep.
And you kind of, so once you start kind of digging a little bit deeper into those things they start to make sense. And as long as they kind of make sense like that, like they kind of understanding those, like I've done olives on desserts. Well, what are olives? Yeah. Olives are salt, right? They're salty. So, salt and chocolate work well together. So olives and chocolate work well together. So it's kind of this weird word association, I guess, in a way.
Totally.
Kind of, it's almost like playing a game. It's like, oh, well, this is like this. And there's some things that are just, are kind of for whimsy as well.
Yeah.
Like the one, Mike, who's the owner of Coquette, my former boss, his current boss, loves chanterelle mushrooms. So I was there for 4 years, and every chanterelle season, when it first came in, he'd look at me and he'd go, so chanterelle mushroom dessert? And I would just kind of laugh at him because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make a mushroom dessert. No way I'm going to make a mushroom dessert. So after the third year of him saying chanterelle mushroom dessert this year, I'm like, fine, I'm going to make a chanterelle mushroom dessert for you. So I made a chanterelle mushroom dessert, and it's actually with corn, because they were around the same time. So it was corn, blackberries, chanterelle mushrooms, maple syrup, and those were kind of the flavor profiles that I used with it. And so you kind of think of like the earthiness of the chanterelles, and they almost had kind of a sweetness. So the maple is kind of really was the bridge to kind of make that kind of all work together.
Yeah, it was delicious.
And it turned out really well. I actually put corn nuts on that dessert too. So
yes.
I got really crazy with that. And I think there's, when you look at your menu as a whole too, sometimes you can play around with different things, and you can have one that's just going to be your oddball, your odd one out, your crazy one. And we were very fortunate at the restaurant that the service staff really believed in what the kitchen was doing. So if they liked something, they were going to sell it. It wasn't like what they think the guests would like. It's like, hey, you know what, this is really cool. And they were excited to share it. And I think that was kind of a great thing about that restaurant, but I think a great thing about any restaurant who's creative, or even not creative, but just being excited about what you're doing and sharing that with people. So.
Absolutely. I actually, Mike still talks about that chanterelle dessert, but he remembers it differently, and I have to always tell him what it actually was. And so I tried to make a chanterelle gelato last year, and working with mushrooms, there's so many processes you have to go through to make it work and all this stuff. And so I spent all this time to make this 1 pint of gelato, and I'm so proud. I take this gelato downstairs, and I'm just like, here, witness me. And it was absolutely terrible. It was the most disgusting ice cream I have ever tasted.
Yeah?
And, yeah.
Do you remember the hay one that I did?
I do, and I remember because it was during
It was worse than that one?
Well, I don't know. I never tasted it because it was during my stage, and you offered it to me, and I'm allergic to hay, and so I had a real dilemma on what I was going to tell you about why I wasn't going to taste your ice cream, but so I didn't end up tasting it.
Allergies are a very good reason not to eat something, so that's a very good reason. But yeah, we got in hay for some reason. We wanted to play around with it, so I washed it really, really well. I think I blanched it just to make sure, and I infused it into the ice cream base, and because I pride myself on I'm going to go out on limits. I can make an ice cream out of anything. Whether or not it's going to be delicious remains to be seen. And that was one of those cases where it was like, I think Mike really, really liked it. I didn't, because it tasted like really just like eating a mouthful of hay.
Sure.
And it was for me not quite as
thrilling,
as delicious as I was really hoping for. But it was an experiment, and like, you know what, I made a hay ice cream, but it never made its way onto the menu. So. Not quite as good as like the sea salt or the mint or the peanut butter sorbet or anything like that, so that we would do. So,
just cutting back to this real fast, I'm adding a little bit of a rough chopped jalapeno, a whole seeded jalapeno to these 4 tomatoes, and then have our cinnamon stick. These guys are kind of small, so go with 2. The thing with this recipe is it's really just like cooking. It doesn't have to be, at least this part of the process, it doesn't have to be as exact as you would with like making an ice cream or something like that. We'll get to that once we get our final product off of this. However, right now we're just cooking something to be delicious and, you know, flavorful. So I'm scraping another vanilla bean into this guy. My big trick for getting people to eat or getting savory flavors to work well so that people do want to eat them in a dessert is a vanilla bean goes a really long way. It'll really transmute something that should be a pasta sauce into a really beautiful thing to put on dessert. It is magical. I love me a vanilla bean.
Yeah, I don't understand why people, when they say something is boring or plain, say it's vanilla. Because,
Oh,
I don't know,
absolutely
because if
not.
you're using the real deal like this, I don't know, I think it's pretty exciting.
It's magical. Speaking of just going back to ice cream, my favorite ice cream you ever made was, I was coming in for dinner one night, and it was a very rare occasion. I never came into dinner at Coquette. I think I'm done with all of these. Thank you. And you had prepared, I think, no less than 6 courses of dessert for me that night. And
Oh, yeah.
And one of them was a strawberry salad with bubblegum ice cream that you had just made enough to make like 2 canals of it. And it was absolutely magical.
Yeah, the bubble, that was a fun one.
That
Yeah.
was so delicious.
With strawberry, with
yes.
watermelon. I think we ended up putting it on, doing something with watermelon with it as well.
It was
Yeah.
so good. So what we're doing here now is we're going to add some sugar to it. I believe in the recipes you guys have, there's a very specific amount of sugar. It's really just kind of like sugar to cover. I just wanted you to have a recipe that would actually work and have been tested. So it's just like when you're making like a very light compote. You just want to add enough sugar that it's going to give the final dessert or the final product a more, I don't know, candied approach.
Dessert-like feel to it.
Dessert-like feel, right. I think it's a Sherry Yard quote. Don't forget to put some dessert in your dessert. So I always use that as like a point of reference when I'm making something stranger.
Yeah, that's a good quote. I like that quote.
Yeah. That's why I put vanilla whipped cream on almost everything. Like, it's so silly, but it's like everything will almost always have vanilla whipped cream. So this guy, thank you. This guy, we're just going to cook on our little burner. The tomatoes are going to start giving off their juice, and the sugar is going to start getting in there, and we're just going to cook it. So this is the salsa verde base for the green tomato foam that will go on our final dessert. I'll show you guys, once this is done, how we end up making that foam. See, like, we didn't add any liquid to it, and already the bottom of the pot is still like super, like, it's juicy. It's doing the thing.
A lot of water in the tomatoes.
Yes. So this is going to take a minute because what we're looking to see happen is all the water to work its way out to make a syrup with the sugar and the spices. And then that's going to be what's going to be kind of our little preserving action for the green tomato, keeping that color green and keeping it, giving us the texture we're looking for. Do y'all have any questions so far?
And feel free to use the chat feature on Zoom. We can answer questions through that way. So we're happy to answer any questions if you have them as we go along. If we're in the middle of something, we can come right to it if you need to as well.
Absolutely.
But something I wanted to talk about too is using spice, using these savory ingredients sometimes, and adding sugar, and how really it changes really dramatically if you add sugar. Like something like black pepper, you know, that changes dramatically when you add, if you're infusing it into an ice cream, because you have the dairy and you have the sugar in there. and it takes on kind of this sparkly kind of floral notes to it. Instead of you think of black pepper as something that's got just heat to it, it really changes it. And with using the jalapeno as well, the sugar kind of brings out more of the citrusy notes in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of it almost makes it brighter in a way.
Yeah, when I plated one of these desserts for my boss Mike this morning, and he's like sitting there eating the foam, and he keeps eating the foam. And he's like, it reminds me of everything greens. It tastes like a green strawberry. It tastes like a green bean. It tastes like all these things that we have. I would never really necessarily be able to pinpoint it as tomato. You just taste the green, and I'm like, success, we did it.
That's
Eureka.
And I think it's interesting sometimes the adjectives we use as professionals to kind of describe certain things.
Right.
And it tastes like green. Well, that's not wrong. It's just that it just tastes like something green, and you kind of you're right. It does taste like that. So it's just kind of an interesting play with that. It smells really, really good. I wish you guys could smell that. Even with a heavy mask on. I wear my nice mask today, and I can smell. I'm standing a good 3-4 feet away from you, and I can still smell it. So it smells really, really good. And I think that's kind of the unfortunate thing about you guys having to do this through Zoom is that you guys don't get to smell the wonderful things that happen here at Gnocchi when we're doing these things.
I was actually thinking about that this morning when I was doing prep for the class, and I had to go check on something downstairs, and I walked back into my kitchen. It just smelled like hot pat a choux, and it smelled like all the things I'd been lining up in my kitchen. It was wonderful.
I think that's part of the joy of doing this is being able to is the aromas of what we're doing, and part of that experience of it. And I think that's we do have some students here in the background. I think that's kind of an interesting thing that sometimes maybe we forget about. When we go to work or we're in school and we're just kind of focused on getting the job done and getting what we need to do for that day, but you kind of forget about the joy of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, I think, a big part of it is if you enjoy what you do and you find pleasure in just the aromas and the sounds of the kitchen and just the general vibe of the energy that goes on in a professional kitchen, I think is kind of a magical thing. But I'm getting all romantic.
Oh, I know.
Now, right?
Well, one of the things that during this whole period with the restaurant being in this strange, format that we hadn't been ever used before, I noticed that one of our sous chefs, he wasn't ever getting frustrated. He wasn't getting caught up in anything. He was just doing his work every day, and I was like, man, he's so deep. That's great. And then I decided that I was going to start embodying him a little bit, and his name is Weston, he's great. And I started going back to paying attention to exactly what I was doing with every single recipe, just like I did when I was starting to learn it. Because now I've made pâte brisée thousands of times in my life. But to actually scale it out carefully and to cut up my butter so that it was beautiful, and then then it gets all mashed up. But it just really enjoying the process of being a baker and a dessert maker has been the biggest benefit of this really, really strange time we're in. It's been so strange. I'm actually adding red tomato, because green tomato and raspberry is going to make a strange color if you add them together, because we're using our color wheel, right? Because it'll be yellow-green with a red-purple, and so that might just translate out to brown. But if you put red tomatoes into that raspberry jalapeno sorbet we made, it would be beautiful. It would be vegetal. The raspberries would definitely be front and center, and with a little bit of spice, and that tomato would give that kind of strange garden flavor. That again, using words.
Yeah. But it makes sense, if you understand where it goes. And I think it's kind of one of the interesting things about plated desserts is you can really kind of go down a rabbit hole with this, like we have a number of times today in our discussions about it. As far as where your inspiration comes from, the stories that you want to tell, and a number of chefs I've worked for in the past talked about your dish telling a story, food telling a story. And it could be from the ingredients, like this is where the ingredients come from, that's going to tell a story. Or it could be the story that's on the plate, like how you plate a dish. Is it taking you through a journey? Is it kind of changing and evolving as you're plating it, or as you're eating it, I'm sorry. And so there's different ways of kind of telling a story, where it's the history of the dish, whether it's just you're sitting down and enjoying it, but as you're eating it, the dessert kind of changes or evolves as you're eating it. And I think that's I mean, for me, that kind of comes from plating it as well. But telling the story of this is how I came up with the dish. This is what I think of with this, and it's interesting because it could be different to a number of people. So
absolutely.
Like I made a cinnamon toast dessert because my dad used to make cinnamon toast growing up, and he used to do it under the broiler because we didn't have a toaster. And so he smeared butter and cinnamon sugar on bread and put it under the broiler, and he made cinnamon toast. So I made a cinnamon toast dessert to and that's what I thought of with that. I don't know if you remember this one, the chocolate covered cherry.
No, that was before me.
That was before you. I did a big sphere of chocolate and I filled with a cherry foam, and chocolate covered cherries are when we would give my mom a gift. That's what we'd give her. We'd give her chocolate covered cherries, like the cherry cordials, like you get at the drugstore or whatever. So I did a chocolate covered cherry dessert for that. So just kind of telling the different stories. And it meant something to me. If it meant something to someone else, probably meant something completely different. Could have been something that turned somebody off. It could have been something that reminded them of something like that. So for me, those childhood memories kind of stuff. And being playful with plated desserts is a lot of fun too. So it's just, there's so many different avenues and so many different ways you can think about it and approach it.
Absolutely. And you need your own language, because when you're working as a restaurant pastry chef, you're often under a lot of pressure to make new things constantly, something that's better than the last thing you made. I mean, most of that pressure is coming from yourself. And so if you have your own language of like, oh, I want to make a teddy bear, tea party like dessert, and it just looks like something completely different, at least you know what it was. I'm always telling Mike, showing him something, I'm like, yeah, it looks like a sea urchin. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, it's a coral reef with a sea urchin. But nope. So right now, this is where we're looking to get our tomatoes. See, they're nice and kind of like jammy. They're candied a little bit. And so at this point, what we would normally do is we would blend it and then chinois it. But I already have some that's already done that we'll then make a foam out of.
Okay, great. So let's. Do you want to grab that, and
Yeah.
I'll kind of move this to the side.
Perfect. Thank you. This gets a little whisk.
So a lot of using the blender today.
Oh yeah. So this is our tomato jam that or the salsa verde, blended, chinois. It has the water and lime juice from the recipe for the tomato foam added to it already, so that we could just rock and roll.
Do you need the blender or the mixer set up?
Yes, please. Perfect.
So how are we going to take this juice that we've made, this liquid, and turn this into a foam?
Okay.
I know how, but
Yes.
I'm asking for everybody else's sake.
So what we have, there are so many different ways to make different foams. The one I use the most at the restaurant is I use VersaWhip, which is a modified soy protein in combination with xanthan. And the reason I do that is because you can whip it, and it is going to hold its shape throughout service. So hold its shape for the 6-7 hours that you're working with it. And then you don't have to continuously re-whip it or keep it in a whipped cream whipper. So I'm actually going to get a whisk real fast. And so you can use an immersion blender, or you can use a hand whisk if you're like really good at shearing in a powder. But I have in this little container the VersaWhip and the xanthan gum scaled out. I use a gram scale because you do want to be somewhat exact with it when you're using these kind of chemicals so that it doesn't turn into a something gummy. So this, thank you, chef. We're just whisking it in until it hydrates.
And then about the dosage for this, as far as percentages, what's kind of a good range for it?
So I go by my gram weight, and I know that, so I'd use 3 grams of xanthan to 7 grams of VersaWhip, and that does 170 grams times 2. And the reason why I work it out that way is if I'm going to make a lime foam, I'm going to use 170 grams of lime and 170 grams of simple syrup.
Okay.
This already has sugar in it, so we don't need to do that. So I adjusted the recipe that you guys have to allow for that.
Yeah. I usually right around like 1% of the
There
VersaWhip, right around there. Right around, yeah. That's close to it, I think. You said 7 grams. It's actually a little bit more. That's probably
So we like
about
10 grams.
About 2%.
Yeah.
So anywhere from 1 to 2% of VersaWhip, and then anywhere from 0.5% to 1% of the xanthan gum. I'd go a little bit less on the xanthan gum sometimes, but it just depends on what you're trying to do this with.
Yeah.
If it's really fluid, like something closer to water, like lemon juice or lime juice, like you said, you maybe need a little bit more to stabilize it.
Yeah.
If it's something a little bit thicker, like I've done this with honey and VersaWhip, so I've actually loosened it with just a little bit of water and no xanthan gum whatsoever, and it whips up. I used it on a cheese plate. It was really, really delicious. Yeah. So you can do some different things, and it just aerates it. It's just, that's funny. It works just like like a meringue would. So it's just the proteins acting just like the proteins would in egg whites, more or less. So
there's something about it I love.
We'll slide you up here in the camera, so we can kind of see the magic a little bit. Pardon the cord. So you guys can kind of see how we started off with the liquid, and it's already kind of lightening in color and aerating like that. So.
Yeah, and then once it gets to the consistency of like shaving cream, it's gonna hold its shape throughout the night. You can pipe it, you can spoon it on a dessert. That's really beautiful too. And it's just magic. Love it.
Yeah. One thing I found it doesn't work very well is a high alcohol content. Found out trying to do it with, I think we tried to do a chartreuse one time. And which theoretically sounds really great, but it didn't work with that high of an alcohol content.
That makes sense.
So it just, it struggled a little bit, but it was still, when we got it to kind of just barely work, it was still really delicious. If you like chartreuse.
Yeah, I love chartreuse. I use chartreuse in desserts all the time. I learned kind of the opposite with using hibiscus. Hibiscus and agar will not set, but VersaWhip, you can make a hibiscus foam. And so that's how I use hibiscus a lot.
Interesting.
It's really strange. Yeah. So yeah, it's starting to get that texture we're looking for.
Like a beautiful meringue.
Yeah.
Really, we can move that back if it makes it easier for you.
And release it. Just like look how, I'll pull it down here. Look how beautiful that is. And that's green tomato foam, right? So.
And it does have savory applications as well. I'll move that mixer back out of your way here. So what's our next step here, Chef?
So the next step, we're gonna make our corn flake crunch. So this is not only is it a flavor component of the dessert, it's also has a very structural component. Whenever you're doing a plated dessert, it's really helpful to have a gravel of some sort, because that is going to, one, be able to hold your sorbet. Two, it's going to break up your lines visually. When you plate your dessert, it's going to make the whole thing look a lot more cohesive. So I might just steal this one right here.
And you need the, do you need the paddle, Chef?
The paddle will be great, thank you.
We'll switch you around here.
Thank you, Chef.
Actually, I'm going to get you one of our fancy paddles that we have.
So this is a really simple combination of ingredients. So this right here is just some masa flour and some salt. Thank you, Chef.
Use the fancy one.
Add that to our bowl. I also love how big this bowl is, because it's not going to fling stuff around like it would in my kitchen, you know? This is 80 grams each of granulated sugar and brown sugar. This is 200 grams of butter, just roughly chopped. Thank you. And then we'll sand this together real fast. So we're just gonna start on low, and we're just combining our ingredients until it starts to, till we don't see as many giant chunks of butter in it.
It's almost like making a streusel, if you will.
Oh, exactly. So it's, yeah, it's the absolute wrong way to make a cookie, but is the perfect way to make a streusel. Yeah.
It's nice. I mean, there's a lot of different components that are very, very different, and it's kind of interesting with plated desserts. You can just kind of put, for me, it's almost like a puzzle. You're putting together a puzzle of what's this going to bring to it, what textures can I use, and the flavors together. So it's kind of an interesting way of putting things together.
Yeah.
Like that. Or sometimes if you're building a cake, well, you're kind of limited by, structurally what can you do with that as well. And you can't mix frozen and hot things together.
Right.
With doing that kind of stuff. Or even, petit gâteau or entremet. There's certain things you're kind of limited by that, which in a way kind of can really spur your creativity with those things. Mm-hmm. But with plated desserts, a lot of times too, I mean, you can do so many different things with it as far as texture and temperature, and that's really makes it kind of an interesting medium to work with.
I don't know if you guys can see, but we kind of have little small, very pea-sized pieces of butter in there. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So now we can turn it back on low. We're gonna add 1 egg yolk. And the reason why we're adding an egg yolk instead of just letting it fly free like you would like a streusel is because it's masa and it's gluten-free flour, that egg yolk will really help bind it and turn it into something else. A little bit of vanilla. And then we'll let this kind of come together where it starts to form its own clumps. One of the things that I learned about plated desserts from you, and it was, you told me to bring in a brownie recipe one day. And so I did. I had this really good recipe, and we worked on it, and we baked it, and you're like, this is a really good brownie. This is how we're going to change it to make it better for a plated dessert. And your theory behind it, which is something I still use today, is that on a plated dessert, you have the opportunity to make every component its absolute most delicious. You can make that brownie like the very center gooey part of the brownie, every single piece. You can make your crumb be like the absolute perfect bowl of cereal or what have you. I did a plated dessert that was based off a chocolate silk pie, and because it was a plated dessert, I was able to incorporate all my favorite kinds of pie And so I did a pecan pie component, I did a banana cream pie component, I did a chocolate component. And when you put it all together, it was chocolate and banana and ice cream and like all these wonderful things that you couldn't make a pie with it, but I can do it in my dough, you know?
That's great.
All right, and so if you guys can see this now it's like starting to clump together, it's turning into a dough, which is exactly what we're looking for. So at this point, I'm going to add a pint of corn flakes, and this is going to add a little bit of texture, but it's also going to really amp up the corn flavor, because corn flakes have like a flavor that just like hits you in the face. Corn. So turn it on low, it's going to break up, it's going to start incorporating into our crumb here. And at this point, we would just like slide it into the oven on a sheet tray, bake it at 350, 10 minutes at a time, keep checking it, keep agitating it until it's like completely golden brown all the way through.
Awesome.
Are we ready to plate some dessert?
Yeah. You guys ready to see some plates? All right, let's have some fun. Let's set this aside.
Go get some of our components from the magic of TV.
Get right down here.
All right. So I'm going to do just a couple of different styles because there are so many different ways that you can work with these components depending on what your particular style as a chef is and what the needs of your restaurant are. There are many times when I'll take like a dessert that is like super structured at night and turn it into a parfait for lunch, and it's same components but it just turns into a different dessert. You're able to utilize more of the work you put in. So we'll start with something like super structured, and this is salted caramel. I gave you all the recipe for that. This is just some baked pâte choux, so just a little profiterole. I baked earlier in the day. Y'all also have the recipe for that in your little packet. So I cut it in half, and what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use it like a little tart shell. So we'll sit it there. You could substitute a traditional like pâte sucrée or a pâte brisée tart shell for this. I just like pâte choux a lot, and I'm going to use every excuse I have to make it. This is that corn flan we made earlier. See that texture? See how it holds itself up? And absolutely beautiful. Good angle. This is our cornflake crumb. A little bit on top to hold our sorbet. Scatter along the plate. I really like a messy plate. Oftentimes I'll like put the whole thing together and then I'll scatter. I'll break a meringue over the top so that there's crumbs. I think it really helps visually make the dessert bigger and makes it just more interesting than just everything being a clean line.
I like the term organic for that.
Organic. Gorgeous. This is our green tomato foam.
Someone who's curious about mushroom gelato.
What now about the mushroom gelato?
They're curious about
Do
it.
you have somebody who's curious about it? If there's anything else you can say about it.
All I can say about it was I made it and it took a lot of work and it was the most disgusting ice cream I've ever eaten in my entire life. It did not work out.
Did you use
I did use chanterelles.
You use chanterelles? Okay.
Yeah, I did try it, and it could have been amazing. I was convinced it was going to be amazing. And I convinced myself wrong. So this is just our green tomato foam. We can do super kind of clean little spheres of it.
And I think you're talking about kind of, we'll use the word organic or kind of messy, the sprinkling the crumble on there, then having some very clean lines, like you want the nice clean spheres on it. And for me, I like the juxtaposition of that.
Yes.
So if you try and do a dessert that's all really, very super clean lines, unless you get it perfect, it's just going to look off. And the reality of service in a restaurant is that you're not going to be able to do that every single time. You're not going to be able to make it as clean as you possibly can.
Right.
Every single time. But if you do something that's all, messy or organic, it just looks sloppy at that point. So what I try and do is you have to have both things going on. So the organic makes, makes the clean lines look that much cleaner.
Yeah.
And the clean lines keep the messy from looking messy. It doesn't look sloppy. It looks like it looks more intentional at that point. So I generally, if I have a plating style, that's probably it. Like most of my plates, you'll have something that's probably either messy or I say organic. It just sounds a little bit cooler, right? And I juxtapose those against something that's very clean, whether it's a nice clean canal. It could be just something as simple as that. A brushed on line of sauce or something like that. So do you need the sorbet, chef?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to grab it?
Oh, thank you. That's great.
We have assistants, chef. So.
Oh my! I'm so used to. I'm running all over the place now. Exactly. That's why I really love a canal, because you can make something that looks incredibly organic, that looks incredibly like just broken on your plate, and if you put a beautiful canal, that shows to the guests that the whole thing has been considered. Yeah. This isn't just like sloppy plating. It's something that you have done intentionally to make it that much more interesting.
Hey James, how long does that foam hold its body?
It'll hold its body for between 6 and 8 hours. So it'll generally hold during an entire service.
And that's kind of the beauty of doing that too, is that it's there, and you can actually re-whip it the next day for the next service if you wanted to as well. So, what do you want to do?
Thanks, so.
Put your canneling station over here. Did our freezer get a little cold for it, or?
Oh yeah, it's cold, but that's all right.
Firmed up a little bit.
Yeah, it's coming. I remember when I first started working for you, I had never cannelled before. And some people would get it like off the bat. It took me a solid 8 months to be able to make a canal that wasn't just like absolutely terrible. And
no, you got it quicker than that, I think. So.
Well, it felt like a long time. So just like a nice little canal of our beautiful sorbet. Like I said before, the sorbet is going to be the star of this show because it is so bright. It's so intensely flavored, where everything else is just going to complement that. So now we're going to pick out some beautiful kettle corn. There's a recipe for that for you guys too. And so if you see, we're working with different heights. We're working with different color contrasts, like putting this white kettle corn on top of that beautiful red raspberry is really going to make everything look even more intense. Just a little bit more. And then one over here just for fun. And then we have the raspberry powder, which this is my favorite thing now. I love this raspberry powder. See, look when we put it on top of this green tomato. And then look how it looks on the corn. And then clean up the rim of our plate a little bit, and it's ready for the guest.
So we'll hold that up. for you to see. How does that look? That looks pretty good. I'm going to try and tilt it a little bit. There we go. I'll let you hold it down because you know which way is the front.
Right.
I probably got it wrong. I yell at the servers all the time for doing that, but I probably got it wrong too. So you can yell at me later.
Yeah. So you got that guy. And then we can do one more little plate of it using all the same components, but with a much more, well, I would say contemporary, but it's just a different style, like the style that you will see in a lot more like casual fine dining restaurants. Just have our caramel in the center. Same pat of choux. That's our foam. I'll get our flan. This would, this style is also really good for serving in a bowl. So same structure for the most part, but it's all gonna be really centered, and there's not gonna be anything that is super, that's not gonna scream fine dining. So got this, got a little bit of crumb. And then we're not even going to try to canal. We're gonna have like rougher pieces of sorbet.
And I've actually seen that a few years ago it started, but people are just kind of trying to get away from canals and doing different ways of plating ice cream.
Yes.
Instead of doing a canal or a round scoop, they're just kind of playing with just different ways of doing it just to kind of break up
the monotony.
Yeah, and then trying to do something a little bit different. So
yeah, exactly. So it's the same amount as I would have done for a canal. It looks completely different. It's also useful if you have, 4 desserts and, this, or we can even, I tried this earlier, just doing some spoons of it on top. Just like you would like a stiff meringue.
And if you wanted to, if you kind of lower your ratio with that and don't whip it quite as much, if you whip it softer, it actually almost like a Sauvignon, but like be a little bit stiffer, so it almost kind of drapes over top of it. Mm-hmm. And I've done that before with some things like that. So that's almost more like a sundae kind of a presentation.
Exactly, like something super more casual. It definitely looks like a sea creature now, and just a different style, the same dessert, the exact same things, the same flavors, the same portions, and you're able to get something completely different out of it. Like who wouldn't love to get that? Like what little kid wouldn't just like go nuts over that, for their birthday brunch?
We'll hold that one up as well. I'll get my thumb off the rims before I yell at myself about that one too. So just kind of a different, a fun, casual approach to it. Something that's maybe not quite as composed, but still looks like it looks like a sundae, like something you get definitely in a bowl or something like that. So great. So actually we can probably leave this right here. You want to play around with another plate, or are we?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to try one?
I
would love to see you do one. When I saw your pictures of you plating my dessert, and it just like was the exact following my exact instructions, but it looked like a Zach Miller dessert.
The pressure's on now. So
I'll smooth this out.
All right. Thank you. So let's take a peek here what we've got.
Uh-oh, he's getting the big boys.
Can you get me the bowl of whole and broken from the freezer, please? The whole and broken pieces in the bowl. We're gonna play. Mary's gonna be very happy because I can use the whole and broken in this too. So we'll play around. Now, generally, I like to show a lot of plate with me. This might be a little bit more old school, I guess, or maybe even a little bit more a few years ago because it's been a while since I was out there doing it.
That's gorgeous.
Tiny dots, lots of tiny dots. And I'll kind of mimic, I guess I can go through and kind of mimic that. Not with something I would probably do for a banquet for 300 people.
No.
But we'll play around with it here. We'll have some fun. And the neat thing about some of these whole and broken pieces is that they come into, we called them cells. I think Mary had a better name for them. They actually referred to them in the field, but from the farmers. But they're like the little seeds.
That's what they're called. Each one is actually a little raspberry.
What do you
seed.
say that again, Mary?
They're called drupelets.
Drupelets. It's such a fun.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember. It's such a fun. That sounds nicer than cells.
Language, and it is each one is a little raspberry actually, because each one is a seed. So it's actually that's actually the raspberry, each little cell.
And there's people started doing that with like, they'd freeze it in liquid nitrogen and you can break them apart. Well, you know what? You can buy a whole case of them just like that and not have to worry about the liquid nitrogen. So,
Super soigné.
you can tell I haven't worked it for a banquet for a lot of people before. So, popcorn, kettle corn. I'm gonna leave a hole.
Yeah.
Waiting for me to break out the tweezers. No tweezers
Put some
today.
microgreens on it.
No tweezers today. So yeah, we'll put some herbs on it. Yeah, why not? You started this. You asked me to do it.
I
So,
know, it's gorgeous.
and we'll do.
It takes me back. That is also exactly how my desserts look too. Everybody makes fun of my desserts with
Right.
the beautiful bloops and that's what I call them. Like, that's gorgeous.
All right. So I guess that's my version of it. If we can see that a little bit closer. So that's kind of. I like to show some negative space on mine. So, but it's something to have fun. And this is kind of what I talked about, kind of the dessert telling a story. That's kind of why I like doing it. Like this bite's going to be different from that bite. It's going to be different from that bite. Then you're going to come over here for the raspberry and like, oh wow, what is that? And then I'm going to try this. And so the dessert evolves and changes as you eat it. There's a lot of little piping and stuff like that in this, but I could do 3 instead of 5 and make my life a little bit easier. But I know sometimes I like to make my life harder. And so as you're eating it, it's going to change and evolve and tell a story, and then and it becomes interesting that way. And you're not really. And the thing is, if you're doing something, if you're looking at, see, like this one, you're going to eat and you're going to get the same thing every single time, which is fine because it's delicious together.
Yeah.
But it's not going to change. And then after about the second or third bite of something, you kind of your palate becomes fatigued, and and it kind of becomes. You kind of lose some of that edge, some of that excitement. And there are different ways of kind of getting around that. I'm going to go off on another tangent about this too. But one is kind of, you see how I did it this way, where it's kind of breaking that up a little bit, and the way I did it this way breaks it up and tells an adventure. But the other way to do it is to have just really small portions that are 2 or 3 bites.
Yes.
But not everybody wants to eat that way. Not everybody can serve things that way. That's kind of like the French Laundry kind of way, or the Alinea kind of way, where it's 3 bites, and then by the time your palate gets fatigued from it, you're on to the next course. So, but that's not the way everybody's going to eat, and that's the way everybody's going to want to serve. So a way to kind of get around that is to kind of have a little bit of an adventure on the plate itself, where you're kind of taking someone through it. Now, and I don't like, some people do where they'll just separate everything out, and like you have your cream or certain things like that, which I don't like because I feel like I have to chase it around. It feels like work at that point, and dessert should be fun as far as eating it. So this you can kind of go around and kind of take yourself on. It's kind of a self-guided adventure at that point. So that's just kind of my theory on plating desserts like that.
And if you use this format of plating, like if I had this on the menu right now, this would be an a la carte dessert, something that somebody has, ordered from their server off the menu. But you could also bring down like one of the pieces of pat of choux. You could bring it down to a 2/3 size of this, and then it could be your tasting dessert that night.
Yeah, and
So
this, yeah,
it's
you
modular.
Yeah, it's modular like this. You do a
Yeah.
smaller canal, you do smaller pieces, and you can do a tasting portion size of it as well.
Yeah,
So,
because that person's already eaten 6 courses before
Right.
it. So this
and you know, nothing against doing a dessert like every bite is the same, because sometimes you want that to be the impact of the
Yeah.
dessert. The impact is everything together,
yeah.
and it has to be everything together in those specific portions. The second time today I couldn't pronounce that word. So, you know, so there's maybe some things like I'm going to do something that's layered, that's stacked like that, that I want everybody to get that experience of all those components, all those flavors, all those textures working together the same every time, because that's the impact of the dessert.
Right.
And sometimes I'll change it up where it's like this, where it's like I want to take them on a little bit of an adventure.
Yeah.
So, or sometimes you can kind of do like little surprises with that, or maybe inside of your kind of more structured thing, you've got maybe some little things kind of hidden inside of there that are surprising to people as well. So it's it just kind of depends on what you want to do, and the dessert's kind of going to tell you,
Yeah.
in a way, what you want to do with it and how you want to proceed with the plating of it. So it's really kind of an interesting thing to just kind of think about and play around with, and have fun with too. You know, sometimes you want to, you know, it's that's part of the fun of it. It's just you get to play around and, you know, create something that's really kind of fun and keeps you interested in your work, and also, you know, more importantly, it keeps the guest interested and wants to come back for more.
Completely.
So that's really, because at the end of the day, you know, we make people happy, so they come back. You know, no matter, you know, how we do it, what we do. If it's, you know, if you're making a chocolate chip cookie, if you're making something like this that's, you know, more interesting, and, you know, green tomato and corn and stuff like that, that's going to be a little bit more of an adventure. You can do those things as long as, you know, it's really about there's room for all of it. So.
Yeah. And I think dessert allows you that flexibility, because the whole thing is whimsical. Like, what a word. But like, the whole thing is about enjoyment. Nobody needs to eat dessert.
No.
And so they do
Well,
it because they love it.
Yeah.
You know? And like, so your appetizer is always going to be something really interesting to show, like, the style of the chef. The entrees are just going to be satisfying. It's something that they want, you know, the best steak you ever had.
It's all about really pure pleasure at that point.
Yeah.
It's not about sustenance.
Right.
It's really about pleasure. When you're talking about plated desserts.
Exactly. It's just creativity and just being like, this, I'm glad I took this extra bit of time and invested more money and had another wine course so that I could really have an experience that I'll remember. Yeah.
Agreed. So I think we've had enough fun.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, thank you and take care.